morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. It's a pleasure to be with you yet again in one of the thematic discussions that we have embarked on organizing in preparation for a historic faith pavilion at COP28. These thematic discussions actually come in helping us and assisting us and inspiring all of us in preparing for the discussions to be held at COP28, as well as engaging with other stakeholders apart from our, the usual suspect constituency of faith actors and faith-based organizations. So we are hoping that at COP28, just a bit of update, we have 70 sessions already confirmed on the schedule of the Faith Pavilion. More than 250 speakers will be coming and will discuss a myriad of issues related to the priorities of COP28, faith and values priorities, as well as the points that have been on the radar screen of all those who are watching what will happen at COP28 in terms of the achievement of the Paris Agreement and the different issues that have been controversial over the past few years, why they have not been implemented, where are we, the stock taking of where everybody is, the ambitious or non-ambitious plans of member states and countries, and what civil society organizations, including faith-based organizations, can do. One of the important issues is the nexus between religion, gender, science, and faith. And this is something that will need to be brought up to the forefront of our discussions. The movement of bringing in high-level faith leaders, high-level women faith leaders, is something that I personally support. I'm supporting, as well as my organization. And this is in light of the usual misconception of people, or misunderstanding of how women are engaged on advancing the values, the ethics, and the moral responsibility engraved in religions, but also mobilizing action by women leaders and local women across the globe and in local communities and the like. So this discussion is very important for all of us, and it is one of the priorities that COP28 president has identified for him. This will be the most inclusive COP to be ever held, and hopefully that a legacy of inclusivity will continue further in other future COPs. Without further ado, let me introduce three friends, sisters who I have been working with in friendship and very highly professional collegial manner. And I am honored and delighted that they have agreed to be with us today for this discussion. The first is Alison Hilliard. Alison is a program director at Wilton Park, who is specialized in ethics and role of religion in conflict and peace building. And this is an important area of work. The second is my sister, Jean Duff, who serves as an advisor to faith groups and to governments and private organizations. and seeking to enhance global and local faith engagement to achieve community development and humanitarian goals. And last but not least, my sister, Dr. Husna Ahmad, who is a humanitarian and writer. She is the CEO of Global One 2015, I believe, which is a faith-based international organization focusing on women. She is also the Secretary General of the World Muslim Leadership Forum. We will also have Azmaira Alibhai, who is the ecosystem coordinator at Faith for Earth. Azmaira is a lawyer by education, but is one instrumental pillar for the Faith for Earth team, and she has been for the past 3 years. And Azmaira will be moderating the question and answer session of this dialogue. So let me hand over to Jean to kick us off. Jean, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Iyad, for those wonderful introductions and for giving Husna and Alison and myself the opportunity to speak to you and your team and the other participants about some of the learnings from the recent Women, Religion and Climate event that was held last month at Wilton Park. Like all of our work, this particular gathering grew out of some important recent undertakings. It is grounded in the 17 rooms process that many of you will be familiar with, funded by the Rockefeller Foundation and managed by the Brookings Institution, a very interesting process which seeks to explore innovation to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. We were involved in 2 of the so-called rooms, room 5, the gender room, and room 17, looking at collaboration. And in both cases, as you won't be surprised to know from our backgrounds, we brought the faith lens. So in room 5, we were looking at the added value of faith to achieving gender goals. And in room 17, we were looking at the added value of faith to achieve climate goals. Out of the room 5 arose a wonderful gathering the year before last called Women Leading Change, and many of you and your participants will have been part of that. This looked at the whole question of advancing gender equality in faith contexts, and it very much informed our thinking going into this work. As a result of these recommendations from room 17, there were 4 principal recommendations to scale up collaboration between the religious and secular worlds for impact on climate goals. They included global energy access, divestment, a multi-faith media project, and Project Dandelion, which you'll hear more about from Mary Robinson shortly, a focus on engaging gender. Following on from that process, Husna Ahmad and I, Husna was a key player in the 17 rooms processes with me. She and I planned a gathering of leaders of faiths, women's organizations, and climate advocates to explore what specific actions could be taken to add the value of faith and women's leadership to the ongoing climate action. We were very fortunate to have a close partnership with Wilton Park in turning the initial plans into the reality of a very productive meeting. We're grateful for the support also from the Doha International Center for Interfaith Dialogue, the International Learning Movement, and others. The goals for our meeting was to build a cohort of women leaders and male allies bonded in friendship. You mentioned friendship earlier. It's key to collaboration, Iyad, through the exchange of ideas and their affirmations of common cause. We wanted to plan greater visibility in various advocacy moments for women's leadership and women's voices. And we wanted to explore how to better join up the often siloed environmental initiatives with specific plans to link women, youth, faith, and Indigenous-led initiatives. Mary Robinson, currently the chair of the Elders, formerly the President of Ireland, and very much focused on climate justice in her recent work, called our assembly to urgent action. We're going to hear some of her remarks now, and in particular, her introduction of Project Dandelion, about which we'll talk more later. I wonder, would it be possible to hear Mary's urgent call to action at this point?
Good afternoon. I'm very happy to provide brief framing remarks for your great discussion, because we're going to talk about working together to move further and faster on climate change. And we do need to move faster, because at the moment we're not winning, if I can put it that way. We are on the cusp of a clean energy, safe climate world. But unfortunately, we're also heading for catastrophe of a world of at least 2.4 degrees warming this century, and probably more than that. And that would be catastrophic. We see the signs of it already, but we can change course. And I believe that women's leadership is a key, because I belong to a group of connected women leaders. We've been doing a lot of homework about something we call Project Dandelion. The dandelion is a great symbol for us. It grows on all 7 continents. It's regenerative. Actually, you can't get rid of it. It's very resilient if you try to get rid of it off your lawn. And you can eat every part of it, or indeed drink, because it's also available in wines and in soups. And the roots take the toxin out of the body. Just a wonderful, wonderful symbol of the way we need to address the climate and nature crisis as women leaders. And we need actions. In our Project Dandelion messaging, we said we actually need to stand up to a huge communications on the other side, on the what I call the dark side, the pro-fossil fuel side. The fossil fuel lobby spends about $4 billion every year messing the science, pretending that we can prolong the life of fossil fuel indefinitely, which we can't, and trying to make sure that we don't address with the urgency that you feel and I feel that we need to stop the climate and nature crisis from destroying us. So we're up against it in that sense. And what we need to do is to, as women, give leadership. Now, how do women lead? They lead by changing behavior in the family, in the community, hopefully in the country. And actually that's needed. We need a crisis mode from the bottom up, because in our democracies today, leaders are not aware that somehow that it's a crisis. They're dealing with climate change because they recognize now we have to deal with it, but they're doing it as a kind of add-on, not as a crisis. And therefore, we're not seeing the transformative change that we need to see. And at that stage, we need bottom-up, really good actions. We need to speak out about the fact that we're spending too much on what's harming us. We're actually spending, the world globally is spending 1.8 trillion a year on what is harming us, which is the fossil fuel and other supports for the wrong kind of agriculture. So we need women to really speak out. We need women to act. We need women to lead locally. We need planning about how to get much more emphasis on affordable clean energy, affordable refurbishing of houses to make them efficient with energy, and so on. And women can really do it. I'm looking forward, because I'll also be with you at the end of your meeting, to a discussion of your actions, of what you think we can do, your advice. And I'm really, really energized by the fact that I'll have come from an Africa climate conference, and we'll tell you about that, and you'll be having your conference just after it. And together, I think we can really make a difference, and we must. It's on our watch, and we have to. Thank you.
Well, there we have Mary Robinson, not mincing words. She's just an extraordinary leader and advocate. And we're very excited about Project Dandelion, and we'll talk to you as we go on in our remarks here about how potentially we could align. But now it's my pleasure to introduce, pass the word to Alison Hilliard at Wilton Park, who did a wonderful job of chairing our recent Women, Religion and Climate meeting. Alison.
Thanks very much, Jean. I mean, just to say, we had around 50 people from 15 different countries come to Wilton Park for 3 days of really intensive conversation. And it was indeed Mary Robinson who set the stage to look at the power and the potential of linking climate change and women and faith and scaling up women's leadership. We were at Wilton Park, which is, as some of you may know, is in the countryside, the English countryside in the UK. And Wilton Park is an executive agency of the UK Government's Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office. For me, it was a practical continuation of the conversations that I had hosted for Wilton Park for months leading up to the high-level faith leaders meeting. And for many months, high-level faith leaders had come together to prepare a joint appeal that some of you may know about. So the appeal signed by 40 faith leaders to COP26, and that was presented to the Vatican before COP26 in October 21. And we had leaders there from the Grand Imam of Al-Azhar, the Archbishop of Canterbury, and Patriarch Bartholomew, the Archbishop of Canterbury, but the key thing was that they were all committing their own followers to taking action for climate change. So yes, they were appealing to political leaders, but they were committing themselves and their followers to put their own teachings on faith into practice and to support across the board far-reaching environmental initiatives. And when they talked about committing their followers to that action, of course, most of those followers are women. And that's where, for me, the potential came in. We know that over 80% of the world's population are adhere to a world major faith, but we know that behind that figure lies the number of women, and that women are the drivers, not just of the practice of the faith, but they're the drivers of climate action that they're already taking on the ground. So we heard so much at our meeting about practical action at all levels that women are already taking, whether that's the huge numbers in the Mothers' Union who are engaged in tree planting or awareness raising or installing solar energy, or the Catholic sisters leading that amazing work of Pope Francis's visionary teaching of Laudate Si, or Sikh women who talked about how they were greening their Gurdwaras. But there was that sense that it was important to bring the woman's voice to the table, and that perhaps that was a missing narrative in the faith action piece on climate change, to, if you like, harness that potential by bringing to the fore what women were already doing, what more they could do, and also to say, why were they doing it? And we heard many examples during our 3 days of the teachings of the faith and how that was inspiring climate action from women on the ground. We heard from women of all ages about how their faith was important to them. I'd really like you to listen to a clip from a really inspiring young woman called Amani Al-Katafe, who's the founder and editor-in-chief of an enormously popular online platform for young women, and it's from Muslim Voices, and she's its founder. So if we could hear Amani about the impact of her faith, that would be great.
My faith goes hand in hand with my concern for the environment. As one of the speakers so eloquently put it, she quoted Prophet Muhammad when he said that we shouldn't waste water even when we're sitting at a flowing river. And I think that really captures the way that Islam approaches the environment, is that it is a responsibility. And for that reason, I feel that fighting for the climate, fighting for the environment is really a form of worship for me, and I'm sure for many other Muslims as well, especially from my generation. I think young people from all backgrounds are really united by the feeling that we are screaming into a void when it comes to the climate crisis. One of the examples that I brought up here is this meme that we're out here suffering with our soggy paper straws when a billionaire can just hop on his private jet and obliterate any impact that we'll make in our everyday lives by these sustainable differences and changes that we're making. And so for young people, it feels very futile. It feels very desperate. I think to combat that, one of the things that would really just empower young people to feel like we are making a difference is to create new measures of accountability for the powers at play that are devastating the environment the most. Identifying where the most negative impact is coming from, and then creating new structures of power to really help rearrange the system.
Great, those were the words of Amani. So as she said, death to soggy straws, she wanted real action, but she was basing that action in her faith. Really powerful statements that for her taking action on the environment was a form of worship. And so we heard from other women of faith about Faith Invest, which many of you I'm sure know about the power of women in consistent faith, consistent investing. We heard from Earth Ethics about how women were leading the charge in campaigning against phasing out fossil fuels. But we also heard about how much there was so much to learn about caring for the environment because of the teachings of the faiths and the very different perspective that could be useful in fueling women and harnessing the power of women to bring about change. We were reminded, for example, of the Hindu sense that the earth is a goddess, and that the Hindu worldview is that the masculine and the feminine are equal, and what that said about taking action on the environment together and women's leadership. And we were reminded how much we can hear from Indigenous people and their understanding of caring for the earth and the environment. Let's hear what Jenny Tape Daniel of the National Centre for Peace and Conflict in New Zealand told us. And she brought us the perspective, of course, of a really pioneering Indigenous woman.
Women's intuition, insight, wisdom, and practical experience equips us to be far better at leading climate action programs. I mean, you've only got to look where the best responses are being made around the world, and it's in the activities and insights and experiences of women. So there's no question about it. I mean, as a theological educator, the doctrines of creation that have been dominant throughout theological education are completely Eurocentric, and I talked about it as saying all is not lost, because Indigenous people have a completely different understanding of our duty towards the care of creation, and it's right there in those words. It's about the care of creation, not about the ownership of it or the domination of it, and we speak that way because our understanding of our relationship is integral. We are the earth and the earth is us. Therefore, the care that we exercise over ourselves is the same care that we exercise over the earth, because we can't be without each other. So there's a profound sense of mutuality and interdependence in our understanding of the doctrine of creation.
Thanks to Jenny. So a really powerful reminder of how faith is inspiring women to pick up that role of leadership.
Women play a very important role in climate action.
So I just want to talk for 1 minute about the nature of leadership that we talked about at the meeting, because there were these two themes: the nature of leadership and getting women to be women leaders in climate action, and then to take action. And I know my Husna is going to speak a little bit about that. But we talked about the need to differentiate between leadership and decision-making power. And I think that's key, because the leaders of the faiths are often men, but there was a recognition that leadership doesn't have to come from those who are an authority or who are taking decisions or are figureheads, that leadership can come from women who are doing grassroots action on climate change. And we heard a lot about encouragement for a different kind of leadership, you know, a leadership of listening, a leadership of listening to the earth, a leadership of listening to those who are suffering from the impact of climate change. Often it was said that climate change has a woman's face, so a leadership that gives hope and inspiration, and a leadership that quite crucially puts community and compassion and inclusivity at the center of everything that it does. So a really redefinition of leadership and of women's leadership, and that was a different piece that they had to bring to this agenda. And then there was this strong call for women leaders of faith to come together to take practical action. So I'll pass to Husna, if I may, to talk about those practical recommendations and that practical action that was put forward. Thanks, Husna.
Thank you so much, Alison. I think for me, what Mary said right at the beginning about the urgency of climate change and taking action. I think that came across very, very clearly in the women and their male allies that were at the meeting at Wilton Park. I think in terms of the passion, the commitment, the call to action, everyone was very, very inspiring and inspired all of us as well. In terms of the objectives that Jean had outlined at the beginning, we met the objectives for sure, and I'll touch upon some of the outcomes that are sort of more immediate. In terms of the recommendations, I can just run through the recommendations. I understand that it's going to be, Audrey, you're going to be sharing the recommendations anyway in the chat. So one of the things that really did come out was building a radical collaboration framework, and that emerged from the meeting, and and one of the key things from that, which I'd like Jean to talk about a little bit later, is actually, having a network, a women's network, particularly on climate change, which can be developed and grown, with the Dandelion Project, etc. So, first of all, one of the key recommendations was the radical collaboration framework, then developing a declaration that outlines the goals and objectives of engaging with women of faith leaders on environmental issues, and conducting a mapping exercise, because one of the things that was lacking is we weren't sure of what was there, what existed. So that's something that's coming out, and it's already been initiated by a couple of the key people that were at the meeting. So it's looking at among the participants at the event, the nexus of women's leadership in faith and climate change and biodiversity loss. And then also in terms of having a repository that people can, dip into and find resources. So that's also being developed as well. So it'll be a repository of resources on the work being carried out by women faith leaders or faith actors. I don't like to be called a faith leader. I like to prefer to be called a faith actor in this space. And this would include, and this is really significant because we had women who weren't English speaking as well. So in terms of multilingual resources, I think that's also a critical resource that we need, so we have training resources that can be accessed by people from non-English speaking countries as well. And then increasing the visibility of women leaders, particularly women from the global south and indigenous women leaders through the media, because I think the media doesn't cover the global south enough. And in terms of indigenous women, that's a space that really needs to be highlighted much more, especially as Jenny herself said that in terms of the actions that they're taking, the small island states, and they're leading. I think Mia Motley, for instance, is absolutely outstanding. Convening representatives of women's networks from all key faith traditions to discuss radical collaboration for global mobilization. This is the network that I mentioned, and I think this is something that, again, Jean can talk about a little bit more. And then building on the existing interfaith initiatives, which includes the joint appeal of faith and science towards COP26, and the Charter of Mecca, which the Muslim World League came out with a couple of years ago. And I think there's both gender and climate change is mentioned quite strongly. And then considering aligning, because I think what we don't want, and which came out very, very clearly, is that everyone is working in silos. So actually aligning with global initiatives and statements and agreements, so that, and we didn't want to mention anything specific. We think this is something that we can explore and look into. And something that's also very critical is encouraging further theological reflection and renewal of our relationship with nature and the duty to care for the earth. So to move away from what's often a patriarchal and colonial framing of the environment, existing for man's use. I think this is something that's very, very critical. And then training both faith and non-faith actors on climate literacy, because a lot of people, we as faith actors, we say that we need a lot of training on faith literacy, but we ourselves also need more training on climate literacy as well, because things are moving so fast, and that's something that's quite important. And then to participate in a series of advocacy events where the voices of women of faith are amplified in discussions on climate change and biodiversity loss. developing a communications campaign to support mass mobilization of women of faith action on climate change and biodiversity loss. Again, the Dandelion Project comes to mind, and Mary Robinson's huge sort of idea is something that we can all really plug into. And developing a documentary film is illustrating faith leadership, breaking through the silos, as I mentioned before, and fostering greater collaboration amongst various stakeholders, including Indigenous women and youth leaders, and encouraging female leadership in all aspects of climate action by bridging the gendered leadership chasm in faith communities. And finally, supporting youth leaders with mentoring and training, recognizing that climate anxiety is a real phenomenon today. So in terms of some of the outcomes, as I said, immediately, I myself will be attending the Global Faith Leaders Summit for Planetary Resurgency on the 6th and 7th of November, which is hosted by the COP28 presidency. I'll be actually leading a session on the role of women in driving action on climate change and integrating gender. And at COP28, we'll be hosting a side event where we will have DICID, His Excellency Ibrahim Al-Naimi, Professor Jagbir Juti from the Birmingham University, and we'll have actually the youth envoy to the UK COP28 delegation. She will also be speaking there. And it's called the Harnessing Diversity, Gender, Faith and Climate Change, Uniting for a Sustainable Future. And also the second thing that we're pushing is the G20 Interfaith Forum will be considering an environment track at the next G20 gathering in Brazil in 2024. And I'd like now to also just pass on to Jean, if you could expand on the framework, the network that we were talking about. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Husna. And just very briefly, because we do want to hear and have input from the gathering here, I'm just going to touch on some of the exploratory ideas of a gathering of women of faith. So, of course, women of faith are already frontline climate activists around the world. And through their faith affiliations, they're already very well networked and have a vast global reach, as Iyad has alluded to in his opening remarks. As a follow-on from our recent Women, Religion and Climate Forum, and encouraged by the action imagined in the Vatican Joint Appeal process that Alison referred to and the MACA Declaration, we're exploring now a process as a next step that would bring leaders of women's networks from all the major faith traditions together for another in-depth conversation, similar to the one that we've just had at Wilton Park, to explore how to join forces for this radical collaboration that was so much a recommendation of our just completed process, a radical collaboration for climate action and for biodiversity action, and to develop a plan to rapidly scale up activities within and among women, faith communities and women-led activities, and to align with secular climate action campaigns. So we imagine, and we're in the very early stages, and we seek your inputs with great respect. We imagine that a process might involve, in that in-depth conversation, a discussion of what women of faith networks are already doing on climate action, and we know it's very extensive. A discussion of what more they would wish to do, how they want to scale up, and then in particular, a discussion about what they might wish to do together and what specific plans and action that would take together among themselves, and then how they might want to align with secular activities such as Project Dandelion. I've given you, because our time is short, I've given you in the chat a link to the Project Dandelion website, and I urge you to take a look at the excellent slide deck that is there. But may I just pose some questions back to the assembled group here to give us guidance. We'd love to hear your feedback on the idea of a gathering of representatives of women of faith networks to explore radical collaboration. We'd like to have your ideas about what form that might take, what the priorities for discussion would be, and most particularly, how do we not reinvent the wheel? How do we build on what's already going on and complement, among other things, UNEP's Faith for Earth Women's Council? So we're very well aware that there are amazing things already going on, and we wish to build on those and now very much seek your inputs. And may I pass this back to Iyad for the remaining time. Thank you.
Would you like to take it over? Thank you.
Great. Unfortunately, Dr. Iyad does have to step out now, but I'll be moderating the question and answer section of this session. Thank you all to our dear speakers for these fantastic remarks, plans, ideas, and strategies for the way forward. I now turn to, I see a question in the chat from Yune, and I invite the other dear participants of this session to think and to formulate what questions you have for our fantastic speakers here today. As I invite Yune to unmute herself kindly and ask the question that she's put in the chat, rather long. So Yune, if you could either speak quickly or summarize this question.
Oh, well, you put me on the spot. Well, I mean, I'm really inspired. I think we need to have a big tent of women. I have personally seen many amazing changes women are bringing, and this is like almost the last hope we have, and women can do, and women, I mean, I'm not exclusively women, but women-led initiative have done amazing things, and that's where we need to really put our emphasis. And I mean, here we are talking about the spiritual, the faith, and the climate change. And I see climate change as the result, a symptom of what the kind of fundamental, the vacuum we have. We need to have collective responsibilities and the sense of community, that we belong to the larger community and the village. Without that, you know, I have money, I deserve to splash, and I am entitled to do more. And that is a kind of the sense that is eroding our environment. And I think we need to bring that kind of caring perception and thinking. So I just wanted to bring that in a broader context. But thank you.
Thank you very much, Yune. I did put you on the spot, but you know those were fantastic remarks, especially in response to and from the perspective that you bring to the table, to the speakers that we heard today. Right, it seems like we have a rather shy participant list today. So I have a question, you know, primarily for Dr. Husna, but you know, Alison and Jean, feel free to jump in. Dr. Husna, you talk about the silos that we often tend to operate in and needing to break out of that. Could you perhaps share in the context of the UNFCCC, but perhaps within some of the other multilateral environmental agreements and their corresponding processes, where you find very strong women of faith contributing in the discussions? Dr. Husna.
I think one of the things that myself and Jean recognized was that this was what was lacking, and that's why, you know, we developed this idea of this discussion at Wilton, which culminated in Wilton Park, because I think the women are there, but you know they're not coming together, and I think that's something that is absolutely crucial and critical. Hence the idea of the network, because even if it's a loose network, having women who all have the passion and the urgency. I think the urgency is the key word that we're looking at. You've got, since the past 10, 15 years, you know, what we are seeing is there are more engagement with the faith community. So you've got the likes of the Multi-Faith Advisory Council to the UN, IATF, you've got the moral imperative to end extreme poverty at the World Bank. You've got PARD, Partnerships for Religions and Development. I think maybe a number of the PARD people are at the General Assembly today in Berlin. That's why they're not attending this event. But you know, in each of them, you know, there's a focus on gender and women. But you know, bring it up, higher in terms of making it more of a priority. I think that's missing. And then opportunities for women, because remember, women, they often the younger women, they may be have child caring responsibilities and financial issues. So being able to support them to be able to attend and be at the table is something that's quite crucial, and we don't have that enough. And luckily we were able to get 15 countries represented in this small group. It's like just a wonderful opportunity. People like Jenny, she traveled, I think, 50 hours or some crazy amount of travel just to be able to attend and be part of the conversations. And her contribution is so vital. But how are we going to tap into that voice? How are we going to be able to have her support us? I think that's something that's quite critical. If I can pass it on to Jean, if you've got further comments, please.
Thank you, Husna. I've been so impressed by Mary Robinson's articulation of the challenge. And again, I'd love you to go back and look at the Project Dandelion website, because the flow of her argument, as she alluded to in her opening remarks to us, is that the fossil fuel factor is the major driver of the challenge that we have. And as the IPCC report really underscored this year, the big missing link is political will to address fossil fuel. And Mary Robinson's thesis is that we need a mass mobilization of women's voices and women's leadership aligned with other sectors, with the youth campaign, with the Indigenous campaigns, and with the other secular campaigns, to really drive the political will, to drive the political pressure needed to bring about the changes in policy and legislation that will affect fossil fuel production. So it's that logic, and certainly in the faith community, we understand, we all are aware that there's a tremendous activity going on within each of the denominations and in each of the faith traditions, but that even joining the dots between the local level and the national level, and the national level and the regional level itself within denominations is a challenge, never mind across those. And again, from all of our collective work with faith, we know that we are all faced with the challenge that our faith work tends to be siloed within the faith community. And so in order to move towards this notion of a mass movement, a mass mobilization of opinion, we understand that joining the dots and getting out of the silos is a critical piece. I do see Deborah Boudreau among the participants in our session today, and Deborah was one of the thought leaders in our meeting from the Buddhist Tzu Chi organization. I just saying hi to Deborah and wondering if she wants to comment on any of the details of the meeting that we might have missed.
Yes, thank you, Jean, and thank you, Dr. Husna and Alison. It's a very, very powerful conversation we have. And from there, honestly, we see currently a lot of networking engage and participate. And the dialogue is open the door, but the action is follow up. And from the regular daily practice, every one of us now, we started to look into it. The climate crisis is around. So as a Buddhist teaching, Dharma Master Zheng Yan, she continued emphasize woman, we are the leader in the household. We are the driving force to bring the community. The community started from your family, your society, and the whole universe. So it's a very powerful conversation. And I also see women always been defined, carry a bucket, go to the supermarket to do shopping grocery. Now we can do the shopping grocery spirit to take care of our Mother Earth, because we are all working together. Thank you, Jean, to share this information about Buddhist founders, Dharma Master Zheng Yan's philosophy, and put into action to lead the woman into the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah.
Alison, I do want to give you an opportunity to jump in if you have any thoughts based on what has just been shared.
Thank you, Azmaira. I'd just like to echo Jean's conversation about this mass mobilization of women's voices. This is a very big tent that Mary Robinson was talking about. There's no sense that it's setting out to reinvent the wheel, and of course it's acknowledging what's happening already. But it'd be wonderful to know what more can be done to put the spotlight on women's leadership here, and whether there might be support for this idea of a women's network of faith to raise the visibility and the profile and to be part of that mass mobilization, because surely it's the mass mobilization that we're all after. So the maximum impact we're all after, because time is short. So very much like to hear even from UNEP and from others whether there would be support for that. Thanks.
I think in Dr. Iyad's opening remarks, he did echo the support on UNEP side, specifically UNEP Faith for Earth initiatives, dedication through the Women Faith Leaders Council, and in light of the good news that we've heard about the coalition, we can expect to see more support, strength behind the efforts that are already ongoing, and also support for the networks that Jean has spoken about, and of course, Dr. Husna. I see Vanya Walker-Lee's hand is up. Vanya, I want to give you an opportunity to pose your question. If you can unmute yourself and keep it within a minute. Okay, perhaps not. Fantastic. Barbara, thank you for your comment in the chat. I see that you're fully agreeing with Yune's call to see the spiritual aspects of climate change included. You also mentioned the work under the Animal Interfaith Alliance, and Yune has come in again to say how UNEP's Gender and Safeguards Unit, and this is a fantastic response to a conversation we had just yesterday on how we can further mainstream faith and interfaith engagement across the House. So, Yune, we will definitely, in collaboration with Jean, Alison, Dr. Husna, and so many others, come back to you on this question. Friends, colleagues, it seems like there are no further questions, unless the speakers have a final parting comment to make. Perhaps not. Okay, it seems not. We are very thankful to you for joining us today, for listening, and most of all, for taking into consideration some of the recommendations made today. You have our email addresses, and if not, Audrey is going to put hers in the chat. Please do reach out. And we'd be happy to either facilitate further conversations and organize opportunities for us to gather within the mechanisms, within the frameworks, and within the initiatives mentioned here today. And with that, have a wonderful afternoon from sunny Nairobi.
Thank you,
Goodbye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.